Welcome back to the another episode of the Hospitality Manifesto. I think it's fun. I like to say that.
Yeah.
Hospitality Manifesto, the podcast. All right. Do we have some? I hope we have some cool intro music as well. I think what we want to talk about today, Robin, is, and I think it sort of ties together the other topics we were talking about is, training the last 5% that others miss. So I guess my question to you to kick this off then is that, training doesn't stop with the onboarding and your first 2 weeks where you have a three table section. So when I say training that last 5% that others miss, what is that to you?
I think, the conversation that I've had around this before is I just made the example that if you are going to be running a dining room and you're a waiter or whatever, for you to have the premier customer experience, for them to come all the way in and enjoy everything and on the way out, then 100 things need to go right. 100 things need to go perfectly. And I just don't think that it's reasonable to think that everybody is going to do all 100 of those things right every single time. So I think that if you're going to train against that, then it's healthy to make up a list. What are the top 100 things that you need to do that just per role? So not just 100 things that 10 are for the hostess and 5 are for the valet and all those things. And it's not about things to avoid doing, but it's a list of 100 things that a server for this conversation needs to do right, and because they do well more than 100 things throughout the course of service, then make a list of those 100 things. And that's what we did. So, I mean, when you and I were working together, I posted a list that we had combined from a number of different sources, both from the floor and from everybody else. So, look, these are the top 100 things that need to go right for the guest experience to be what we wanted it to be. And it's not necessarily about, it's about details. And then every server was different. So I put the question to them. They said, is every server go through this list and pick 5 things that either you don't make a priority, or I'm not great at that. From wine service when the bottle is being twisted the right way, or from opening a cork, whatever, like all those things. What out of 100, can you pick 5? Can you pick 5 of those that maybe you could improve on, and then put some effort into it, work on
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily the manager. The onus is on the manager to go around and yelling at people all the time. And we've worked lots of people that make it their premise, and management is yelling at people, and that's not it at all. But if you can have a conversation with a staff member and say, hey, look, this isn't a performance review. I'm not evaluating you. I want you to have a good hard look and say, look, if this is 100 things that have to go right, can you pick 2 or 3 that you can identify and put some effort into? And then, do you need help? Do you need training on that? Because we just had a conversation with a client about making espressos, because she's a lunch server. She, making espresso. It's not hard, but there's a right way and a wrong way. And if you're going to do it right, you need a little bit of training. You can't
Oh,
guess.
yeah.
But
No,
it's 10 minutes. It's 10 minutes with the training.
yeah.
But
I used to run an Italian restaurant, high-end Italian. If you didn't make that espresso right, man, that was a
well, you got it in
problem.
your face. It's like pouring a
Oh, yeah.
Guinness. You're working
Oh,
at an Irish bar. You don't know how to pour a Guinness. You're going to get it in the face.
yeah.
But I mean, those are just small things. But I think about training, and often you think training. Okay, I just got hired. You may or may not get an orientation, right? Like a real sit down to say, look, this is what we're all about. This is what we're trying to achieve. Meet the managers, meet the chef, go through the menu, talk about what they're trying to do. And you don't have to be, a 5-star French restaurant, but I think anybody that's being onboarded in any position needs to have a really good understanding about what are we trying to do here. And I think that has to come from a manager or an owner. I think all the staff should understand who the owner is.
Yeah.
Um, but we see that at the beginning, but maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. Or they
Yeah.
think about training as they get it in the first 3 or 4 shifts of their work, and then they leave you.
Yeah. Well, I would say I would add to that. I mean, how many places have you seen where it's like, welcome aboard, poof, out they go, they, pushed onto the floor. with little to no training or onboarding. And some restaurants will do that because well, training's expensive. Then I have to have an extra body on and that sort of thing. But if you're not building the foundation for that employee and then getting them to sort of buy in and invest in your culture and your brand and your message and what it is you're wanting to do, I would submit that your training costs are going to be double because you're not going to be able to retain that person necessarily, or yeah, or that person isn't going to be um, sort of excelling in their position, and it's going to take them longer to get up to speed. And if you had just spent a day or two, going through and training, and this is something we always did was working on the service cycle, right? And then what is that service cycle from when that guest arrives to when they leave? And that was my messaging to the team was that was always the minimum standard. Like this is the minimum expectation for the service cycle, right? And then but we want to be over and above that, right? So then how do we do that? So I think when we talk about what's that last 5%, it's it starts with the day that team member is hired. Well, then it's ongoing from there, right? And then being consistent with that, and then and the training isn't just the onboarding and their first couple of days and they have a 2 or 3 table section and they're shadowing somebody else, whatever. But even your people that have been there 5, 8, 10 years, right? It's like micro training as well, right? And I think it's micro training or you call it the 1 minute manager or catch them doing it right or whatever it is,
Lots
right?
of those,
But
lots of
but
idioms.
but yeah, so but I think short messaging, or you can even do this in pre-shift, right?
If you're doing pre-shifts, but I would argue if you're not, your valuable training opportunity missed. If
Oh,
you're not
absolutely.
taking a couple of minutes at the beginning of shift to pull everybody together,
Yeah.
and even if it's some people started at 4:30, whatever, at 5:05 or 5:15, pulling all the servers together, even if it's on the floor. I don't even mind being pre-shift being done on the floor in a quiet section or by the bar,
Yeah.
and the staff can say, okay, you know what, guys, I have to. I'll be back just after pre-shift to take your order. So that way they see that they're getting the information.
Oh, for sure. And I think, things like that, and then just having you know, if you have like a service focus, right? Okay, I think that we need to tighten up our service cycle in this particular area, right? If you're in a white tablecloth, it's crumbing the tables, right? Or with this, we want to focus on table maintenance today, right? Or
Or the
it's
leveling of the tables. Like even working with the bussers to say, guys, having tables that meet perfectly is critical, and
yeah.
and putting that in.
Yeah, or even something like when we talk about sort of if our service focus is going to be bring our average guest check up. How many times you've been out to a restaurant where the server comes by and then you know takes your empty glass away, right, and then wanders off, right, and like that not can I bring you another, right? Doesn't take takes the same amount of time, right? But there's an opportunity lost, right? So right? Those sort of things. And then, yeah, but just talking about, even like how is that server picking up that glass? Are they doing the claw, right? And walking away with it, right? When we talk about what's that 5% that differentiates you from the competition, it's those sort of things, and it's yeah that ongoing training and messaging to your team.
Would you argue that this is as important, more important, or not as important when you are a restaurant hiring highly skilled, pre-trained people?
I mean, I think sometimes you have to, when you're bringing people in, you're bringing experienced people in. Sometimes you have to train the bad habits out of them, right? So if they're coming in, well, I've been a server for 10 years and I worked here and I worked there, that's great, right? But you haven't worked here,
Well, that's
right?
exactly right.
It's about having them, and I keep saying this, it's having them buy into your culture. But you have, and again, part of the culture is that uh, that cleanliness above all else, right? And the non-compromising on the cleanliness of the place. That's part of your culture. But then part of your culture is also that ongoing training and messaging and education of your team. Even in things like how many times you like when you've been to a place and they've rolled out a new menu or they've got a new fresh sheet, right? And you ask the server a question about it, and like, well, I don't know. I'll just be right back,
Today's only my second day with this new menu.
right? Right, but that tells me the restaurant hasn't taken the time, invested the time, right, in making sure before that person is guest facing, right? They need to be the expert on what it is you're doing, right? They need to be that they're your ambassador for that guest, right? And if you're not equipping them with the knowledge to answer simple menu questions for the most part, right? To me, that's a problem. So again, that to me that falls in that 5%.
Well, and I
What
think that,
others aren't
that
doing.
where people fall down is that the manager says, well, that guy Steve, I just hired him. He was trained by Umberto, so he knows how to be a waiter. I don't have he doesn't need the training, and I would argue that he needs more training than the next guy. You got five waiters on the floor. They all came from five different restaurants. Guess what? You got five different styles of service on the floor,
Yeah,
and if even if they liked Steve's service, which you know but you know,
people like
even if they came back for that and they don't get you, they get Robin, and Robin's service is a little bit different, a whole lot better, but a little bit different. Then it's not that they had two completely different experiences. They enjoyed
yeah,
mine, they didn't really like you, but the point being is that you will want to train against that.
yeah.
Yes, you bought you hired them for their skills, but
Yeah.
this is your restaurant. You need to make sure that the service is the same.
Well, it does, and I think now the caveat to that, and I used to tell our teams this when we're training that service cycle is, here's the minimum standards, but we don't want them to be robotic,
No,
right?
of course not.
We still want them to engage with that table, find out how their day was, if it's a table that's really chatty and wants to engage, then great. If they want to be left alone and just have you come and take their, then fine. You need to adjust your service to match what that guest's expectations are going to
Yeah,
be,
yeah,
right? Without necessarily being robotic. And I think this is something that sometimes, that the chains get wrong, right?
yes.
With all their standards about, how many times you've been in a restaurant. Well, do you want the garlic dip? You want gravy? Do you want because they've been robotically trained to say I need to ask these questions all the time.
Or
Whereas
their
like
new handheld POS
yeah,
now.
pops up and you have to
I have to say yes or no to the garlic dip, so it's telling me to ask you.
exactly right. So I think when again we if we're hiring hospitality professionals here then and we're taking the time to train them in our service standards and our service cycle and what our expectations are, well then you also have to have some trust in them too that they're going to sort of read and understand the table while maintaining our service standards, right? But adjusting that service based on what their feeling is and their engagement with that customer and what that customer is going to want. So again, that to me having sort of having the emotional intelligence in your servers and empowering them to be able to do that. So when that customer does come back, that minimum standard is always met, right? And that experience is always the same, right? But allowing those servers, to have a personality and engage with the customer kind of, on a personal level. And that's what builds regulars, right?
Absolutely.
The emotional connection that people have with your restaurant, right? Again, your food could be awesome, right? But if people left, feeling like, that wasn't great. I always use the analogy of like, somebody can walk out of your restaurant saying, oh, that was $50. Oh, well, can't believe that was $50, right? They're
Absolutely.
still spending the $50, but how did you make them feel, right? And I think that's where again that goes to that training, that ongoing training. That's where that last 5% of the experience is, right? So
Where does like we talked about the waiters and empowering themselves to do that, but where does the manager, like even the day manager or the shift manager, where do they play into that?
well, I think they have to, and again, I don't they don't necessarily want to be sort of the the service watchdog or bulldog or whatever, and
Asshole.
especially yeah, asshole as well. So and I think especially nowadays, you that old school, you know, battle axe manager who everybody was just terrified of. I don't think the young people of today are going to respond to that. You can't manage that way anyway, right? So it's sort of those soft skills, right? That human touch, right? Training on those basic service standards as well, but the empathy, emotional intelligence, that sort of thing, and then helping those customers or those staff that art of reading the customer, right? And then, but that manager has to be involved on the table, right? Or on the floor, I should say. And then
Out of the office and
yeah,
on the floor
exactly,
because they
right.
can't see
And then
anything from up there.
yeah, and then check and checking in, with you can't get trapped on Expo, right? Is even if you're in the weeds all night, right? You have to extricate yourself from Expo. Check in at the front door, check in with the hostess, check in with the bar.
Or get yourself off the host stand. I find a lot of managers get stuck on the host stand.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So again, checking in with your team, and then when you're doing that, taking the opportunity while you're there to use that as kind of micro training as well. Whether it's reminding the hostesses, if make sure we're wiping the menus down, right? Or simple things like when you're taking the guests to the table, especially new younger hostess, host or hostesses, turn around and ask the guest how they were, how's their day so far, and then how fast are they walking? Don't sprint in front of the customer, right? You don't want to be at the table 3 minutes before the guest is,
And
right?
I'm all about the hostesses selling you the table before you get there.
Yeah,
Right? Say, hey, I've got a great table. It's right on the window for you. And you feel, oh, relieved. Oh, great. We've got a table on the window. Like, you're not even there yet and you're excited to get there.
yeah,
Right? Or, I've picked you a nice table. It's away from the large party over there. So, oh, good. I hate being right beside a large party.
yeah,
So, I think that there's, to sell the table to them on their way to the table, just
yeah,
when they get there, they're excited to be there. And it just sets yourself up for success.
yeah.
And I don't want to get too stuck on hostesses, but what about the owner? Like, we've talked about the manager's role in this. Where does the owner play in this?
I mean, I guess it depends on how engaged and involved the owner is, right, in the day to day. But let's say you're a hands-on owner operator, right? I think people like to see the owner. They like to see the owner and they like to see the chef, right? So again, being on the floor, thank you for coming, right? I like the best at that is Vikram, right? Vidges, right? And then his place out in South Surrey, my shanty. Anytime I went to one of Vikram's restaurants, he was always there. I don't know if there's three of him or how he did that, but
Clones,
again,
clones. Yeah.
right? But coming by, just thank you for coming. Hope you're enjoying it.
Well,
And that,
Vicar is a celebrity, so
yeah,
but you don't have to be to just be to be the person in charge. And I always thought that's something you always did, right? Is when you were on the floor, you had a presence, right? And the customers didn't have to ask who's the manager. That's the fucking manager. Like, no shit. It's not because you were standing like this, but because you're there and you're involved. And this is my thing is that I had a conversation with an owner and a manager. We were talking about spillage. We were talking about draft in particular, and the manager said, the staff are really good about reining in when they mess up a pint or a pint gets returned or some other problem. They're really really good at that. But I said, well, if they're good at that, how come our draft variance is still 6-7%? Said, well, I think it's just because when they're knocking foam off, that isn't getting accounted for. And I'm like, why are they knocking foam off? Well, because they didn't pour a perfect pint. I said, well, why is that happening? Well, because sometimes they're not good at it or whatever, or sometimes it's the end of a keg, and so you got to add a little head, and they don't know how to do that, and so that he was trying to say we should add a bigger margin for spillage because of this. And so I challenged him, and I said, "But you know how to do that, right?" He's like, "Well, yeah." I said, "Can you identify, like, when you can feel it in the tap when the keg is going to empty, and you know what I mean, because you can feel it. You know by how it's pouring, you're getting close to the end."
no, I could tell you about 30 seconds before that keg goes.
Right. Well, and now with fob technology and the beer lines, you don't get the beer bath that's how we got trained, right? You went home stinking of beer, you screwed up. But now, we said, well, hold on. So let me understand this. So if you poured all the beer, we probably would need to do this, but because they're doing it, he's like, well, yeah. And I said, well, then hold on. Why don't they know? If you know how to do it, and you're really, really good at this, and they clearly aren't, and you've seen them do this, like that, you've seen them, you need to step in. You need to stay. Whoa, whoa, whoa! If you see a server or a bartender knocking beer, because I appreciate lunch shift. Maybe it's a Sunday night. There isn't a bartender on, and I'm all for always having a bartender on, but your schedule. Then you have to train them to be able to do it well. Like, and not just do it, but do it well, because you are pissing money down the drain. Same thing. You would never let a bartender or a busboy make a margarita that he doesn't know what he's doing, because he's gonna mess it up, and that's money. That's money. And I think that training comes down to, if there's knowledge in the manager's head that has not been downloaded into the staff or into one waiter or whoever, then you're not doing your job. And I think as an owner, or as a general manager, or when you sit at a manager's meeting, to say, what did we teach anybody this week? Give me some examples of some things we taught. Hey, well, I pulled Steve aside and showed him a better way to pour beer. Or I had a conversation with so-and-so, the bus boy, about how it's easier to carry up the bus tubs and get back and forth. Or, I was showing somebody else how to level a table really, really easy, and how to, instead of always drilling down a feet, you drill up. Like, there's little things like that guys that have been doing it for a while. But that's the only way to learn the lesson, is from the guys that have been doing it for a while, is to teach it. And I think if a manager isn't teaching something every day, I would argue that he didn't earn his money. And I don't care what he's paid, right? But showing up and locking the doors and making sure that there's no customers behind, and all the staff left and everybody punched out, I mean, that is not the job. The job is the teaching, and if they're missing that point, then I'd argue that they didn't earn their paycheck.
No, for sure. And something you asked about the owners and what they can do. I want to take that back to the owner, what they can do day to day. And I use the Vikram as an example, but I think what the owner can do, especially if they're an owner operator and they're there day to day, they set the tone, they set the culture. But I think for the customer, they can create that home away from home feeling, right? Because you're the owner. That person's coming into your house, into your home, right? So it's incumbent upon you as the owner to set that tone and make them feel warm and welcome and appreciated, right? But that will filter down to your team as well, right? So for the owners, if you're not out there setting that, if you're there day to day, if you're not out there setting that tone for your managers and for the rest of your team, well, I think you're missing the 5% that you should be doing as well.
I completely agree. And I think that staff appreciate being taught something.
Yeah.
Right? Especially, and I know that that's true with the young people. So let me pull you aside. Let me show you a little something something. That's going to make your life a little bit easier. And I usually premise it. Hey, look, this is going to make your life a little easier. Let me show you how to do this. But everything from folding napkins quickly to whatever they're doing, I think that if a manager that they respect takes a minute to pull them aside and teach them something, man, like, there's no bigger compliment than that. And it's not to say that you have to teach that guy because he sucks. It's like, no, you know what? I think most people, and the vast majority, like 98% of people, care about doing a good job. They really want to do a good job, but they don't know. No one's made an investment in them.
Something simple as using a tray. Why do we use the tray? Right? Well, because then you don't have to put your grubby hands on somebody's glassware that you're carrying all the way across. Yes, you're going to have to put it down, but it's a nicer way to present the drink at the table, right?
Absolutely.
As opposed to just drop it, right? So I think bring it back to where we are. It's talking about the training. It's that micro training, right? It's the micro training or 1 minute manager, whatever you want to call it, right? I think that setting that as your culture and your standard and your expectation for the day-to-day operation in your restaurant, that's how you find that last 5%, I think.
Well, I bet you, and I would challenge this to every manager working outside Expo for the next week, is to find that waiter that can only carry 2 plates. Right? I mean, how
Yeah.
many times? Right? So, well, I have to make 2 trips because I can only carry 2 plates at a time. You go, well, no, you can't. You can carry three
Yeah.
plates.
Yeah.
Right? And yeah, a four top. Everybody. I mean, some guys can carry 4 plates well.
Oh, I'm back in the day before I had like sort of semi or early arthritis in the hands.
How do you think I got the arthritis from the wrists? It's
I know,
very
yeah.
good.
I still have the restaurant fingers though from working Expo, and I can still pick up hot plates and pans and stuff. Right? I think I just the nerve endings are gone. That's why. But yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, learn how to carry more than 2 plates for God's sake.
But I mean, as a takeaway, and I think that that if if folks are just listening to this to listen to us bitch about restaurants, we're not talking about. That's not what we're trying to do. Is I want you to have a takeaway. Is that I'm challenging the managers out there to find something, even if it's their pet peeve. Instead, you don't have to use my pet peeves. Use one of your own, and teach the staff something this weekend. Really try and go out there and say, hey, let me show you a better way to do this. And I think not only will the staff member, if you've done it well, that the staff member is going to walk away feeling good because they had something invested, and you're going to walk away feeling like, you know what, I made an impact today.
Yeah.
And I think I think if this job gets really really hard if you're not getting that out of your job every day,
Hmm.
is that you're feeling like you did something more than cashed out 9 waiters and I've had it.
Well, you know, if everybody listens to this and takes advice, I think we just saved the restaurant industry.